Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take the densest, most convoluted subjects, or in today's case, maybe the most sensational and physics-defying subjects, and really drill down to the foundational truths.
Today, we are traveling back to a very specific moment in time, World War II. It
Right.
was this frantic technological crucible.
Right.
Nations were just pouring resources into getting any advantage, no matter how outlandish it sounded. And of course, secrecy was everything.
And that potent mix of, high-speed advancement and extreme government secrecy. Well, it gave birth to one of the most stubborn and truly mind-bending urban legends of the 20th century, the Philadelphia experiment.
Mm.
This is the tale of a U.S. Navy destroyer escort, the USS Eldridge. And the claims are that during a top-secret test in 1943, it achieved these radical technological feats: visual invisibility, immediate teleportation, and even somehow accidental time travel.
It's a story that's so dramatic, it's really secured its place in modern folklore. You see it referenced right alongside other mysterious wartime tales like, say, the Nazi gold train.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's been an X-Files episode, a bunch of books, and of course that really cheesy B-movie from 1984.
Which, ironically, became a major source for the myth's later growth. It kind of fed back into the legend itself.
Exactly. So our mission today is clear. We've got a deep stack of sources here detailing the absolute wildest claims crewmen fused into the ship's metal, jumps through time.
Everything.
We've got the strange cast of characters who popularized it, the decades of official denials from the Navy, and the documented scientific reality of what the Navy was actually doing in Philadelphia.
So we need to unpack this whole mystery. We need to understand the mechanics of the hoax, really,
Yeah.
and separate this tale from the documented facts that have let it persist for almost 80 years now.
And to do that, we have to start not in 1943 with the supposed experiment, but actually a decade later with the man who, for all intents and purposes, birthed the legend, Morris K. Jessup.
That's where it all begins.
So our journey really kicks off in 1955, 12 years after the event. Why did this story suddenly pop up then, and who is this guy, Morris K. Jessup?
Well, Jessup was an intellectual polymath, though maybe a somewhat eccentric one. The sources paint him as an astrophysicist, a mathematician, a professor, but he also did stints as a car parts salesman
Really?
and an archaeologist. By the 1950s, though, he was fully immersed in ufology. He had a reputation for what some people called wild ideas, but critically, he was a respected figure. He lent a certain academic seriousness to these topics.
Right, he wasn't just some fringe writer scribbling in a basement. He was trying to apply rigorous logic and analysis to this new field of UFO study.
Exactly. And in 1955, he publishes his book, The Case for the UFO, Unidentified Flying Objects. It was pretty popular. It attracted the kind of audience you'd expect: curious people, skeptics, and the deeply passionate fringe observers.
Sure.
But it also surprisingly drew interest from entities much closer to the establishment, including, and this becomes very important later, various branches of the U.S. government.
Okay, so the stage is set. Jessup is publishing on UFOs, and then the catalyst arrives. Tell us about this unsolicited correspondence he got in January of 55.
This is the moment. This is where the legend sparks into life. Jessup starts receiving these letters from a man who identified himself as Carl Allen, although he often signed off as Carlos Miguel Allende.
Okay.
And these were not fan mail. They were a deeply bizarre, detailed, and utterly unhinged account of a secret U.S. Navy operation at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in 1943 involving the USS Eldridge.
What made the letters themselves so strange? Because the nature of the communication is almost as famous as the claims inside it.
Well, our sources really highlight the immediate red flags. About Allen's mental state and his intent. The letters were just characterized by this almost frantic eccentricity.
How so?
The handwriting was erratic, it was filled with grammatical errors, and it featured text that was just randomly capitalized or underlined, seemingly for emphasis. It creates this visual impression of a deeply disturbed person trying to convey overwhelming knowledge.
It sounds like someone desperately trying to signal that this information is important, but they don't know how to organize it properly.
Precisely. It was chaos, but it was delivered with conviction. He used several variations of his own name, and crucially, he included this seemingly meaningless string of letters and numbers that investigators later identified as his actual Navy ID, and that provided just enough verifiable detail to anchor these wild claims in some kind of reality.
And then there's a closing. The bizarre, almost antagonistic closing.
He signed off, disrespectfully yours.
Disrespectfully yours. Wow, that really sets a tone, doesn't it? It suggests he's not a helpful informant, but someone who's deliberately antagonizing the person he's writing to, maybe signaling a hostility toward established authorities like Jessup.
Absolutely. It was not the signature of someone who wants to be taken seriously as a colleague.
Yeah.
It was the signature of a provocateur.
Okay.
And on top of that, Allen provided this very specific but very hard to verify return address. Road number 1, Box 223, New Kensington, Pennsylvania.
And did anyone check it out?
They did. When investigators later followed up, the location was described as a dead end, maybe an abandoned house. This pattern, a specific verifiable detail coupled with immediate opacity, that's the trademark of a successful hoaxer, or, as Allen would later be described, a master leg puller.
So you have Jessup, a respected academic looking into fringe science, and he gets these incredibly detailed yet chaotic letters from this provocative, maybe unstable source. Allen's writing was, it was ingenious, whether he meant it to be or not. He gave just enough confusion to make a later Navy investigation seem plausible, and just enough detail to hook a curious researcher like Jessup.
It was the perfect storm.
Alep.
The letters didn't just relate facts, they created this whole atmosphere of suppressed knowledge and high drama. And Jessup, intrigued by this apparent connection between his UFO research and this sudden military secret, he took the bait.
Okay, so now we have to get to the claims themselves, because they escalate from interesting to just absolutely fantastical very quickly. What exactly did Allen, who was supposedly observing from a ship called the SS Andrew Fuseth, claim happened to the USS Eldridge in October 1943?
Allen described a two-part event. He said Project Rainbow, which was the government's secret name for this, was an operation trying to achieve radar invisibility. But during the October test, something went catastrophically wrong. It pushed the result far beyond just radar stealth.
What was the sequence of events he laid out?
First, he described this strange, intense, green glowing fog that suddenly just enveloped the USS Eldridge. It was visual, dense, and unnatural.
Okay.
Within minutes, the entire destroyer escort vanished, not just hidden by fog, but gone. He claimed the vessel was rendered completely invisible to the naked eye.
And the teleportation part.
The disappearance coincided with this massive, inexplicable movement. Allen claimed the Eldridge vanished from the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard and then reappeared instantly, roughly 480 kilometers away, in Norfolk, Virginia.
And then it came back.
Then it vanished again from Norfolk and reappeared back in Philadelphia.
That's a huge claim. Instantaneous travel over hundreds of kilometers. And Allen noted that during the disappearance, something peculiar was still visible on the surface of the water. Right.
Yes, this is a critical detail, he added. He claimed when the ship visually disappeared, there was still a slight indentation or disturbance, something that looked like it was floating on the surface. He took this as proof that the technology was revolutionary, but also deeply flawed. And the reason for this miracle, Allen insisted, was because the U.S. government had successfully solved and weaponized Albert Einstein's unified field theory, the UFT.
Okay, we have to spend a good amount of time here. The UFT claim is what elevates this from just a military secret story to a fundamental challenge to the laws of physics. So what exactly is the unified field theory, and why is the claim that the Navy solved it in 1943 so monumental?
It's monumental because the UFT is like the theoretical holy grail of modern physics. After his major breakthroughs with special and general relativity, Einstein dedicated the last decades of his life, mostly unsuccessfully, to developing this theory. The ultimate goal of UFT is to reconcile the four fundamental forces of nature into one single comprehensive framework.
And what are those four forces again for everyone listening?
You have gravity, which governs large-scale structure and attraction. You have electromagnetism, which governs light, electricity, chemistry.
Right.
And then you have the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force, which govern the interactions inside an atomic nucleus. They all operate across wildly different scales, and fundamentally, they don't play nicely together in our current mathematical models.
So, if you were to suddenly find a single equation that explained all four of those forces, what would that let you do?
It would grant you absolute control over matter, energy, space, and time. As Allen correctly guessed, if you could unify gravity and electromagnetism, you could theoretically manipulate the gravitational field itself using electromagnetic energy.
So the implications are?
The hypothetical implications, which Allen and all the conspiracy theorists latch onto, include achieving controlled matter manipulation, generating self-sustaining energy, bending space-time to create wormholes, controlling gravity, and critically for the Eldridge story, rendering objects invisible or even achieving controlled time travel. Allen was basically claiming the U.S. Navy solved the theory of everything and gained the power of the gods, all in 1943.
That really puts the claims into perspective. This isn't just about a slightly advanced radar scrambler. This is about rewriting reality itself.
Exactly. It's the ultimate science fiction possibility, and it gave the story this intellectual weight, even if that weight was based on a complete misapplication of physics.
If the disappearance was shocking, the aftermath described by Allen is what provides the visceral, horrific, emotional core of this whole legend. What did he describe happening to the crew when the ship reappeared?
The claims are. They're deeply, deeply disturbing. Allen wrote that he heard screams and later managed to board the Eldridge. He claimed the crew suffered catastrophic, horrifying fates. It suggested that the physical stresses of manipulating space-time were deadly.
What kind of fates?
Some were found violently ill or suffering from severe psychological trauma, having gone completely insane.
But the most famous and most ghastly detail is the physical integration of man and machine.
Yes. Allen claimed that some crew members were allegedly found with their limbs fused or bonded directly with the ship's metal structures. They were literally embedded in the steel hull or the deck plating, trapped in this state of partial dematerialization.
Wow.
Other claims suggested crew members just vanished entirely or, in the most gruesome accounts, rematerialized inside out or were otherwise horrifically mutilated by the impossible physics of the jump.
That detail men merged with steel is brilliant in a macabre way because it provides this tangible, emotional anchor to the narrative. It's not just a ship that disappeared, it's a terrifying human cost. It makes the story sticky. Why do you think that specific detail became the most persistent and powerful part of the legend?
Because it speaks to a primal fear of technological catastrophe. We understand what a sinking ship means, but we don't understand what it means to be, undone by physics itself. The image of organic material fusing with inorganic steel is this perfect Gothic horror metaphor for the loss of human control in the face of impossible runaway technology.
It instantly transforms a military experiment into a tragedy of cosmic scale.
It ensures people remember the story long after they forget the technical details.
And just when you think the claims couldn't get any wilder, they throw in time travel.
That's right. Time travel is the final, mind-bending twist that completes the sci-fi spectacle. Other accounts that started circulating claim that during the jump to Norfolk, the ship somehow managed to arrive 10 minutes before it had officially vanished in Philadelphia.
So it traveled backward in time by 10 minutes during the teleportation jump. That defies basic causality.
Absolutely. It suggests that the technology wasn't just manipulating space, but the timeline itself. And then, when it vanished from Norfolk and reappeared back in Philadelphia, it did so 10 minutes after its initial disappearance time.
Creating a 20-minute gap.
A profound 20-minute jump, 10 minutes backward and 10 minutes forward in time in the perception of the observers. This element provided the necessary proof for believers that the UFT was real and that the U.S. military had accidentally achieved time manipulation.
It's astonishing how this narrative manages to combine the most ambitious scientific goal, the UFT, with the most profound technological failure, delivered through this lens of psychological horror. It's a compelling, if deeply unbelievable story. I can see why Jessup found it so hard to just dismiss, and why the Navy eventually took note.
And that's the next chapter. The story moved from a curiosity on Jessup's desk to a full-blown internal concern for the military establishment because of how Carl Allen chose to escalate his campaign. This brings the Office of Naval Research, the ONR, into the fold.
So how did the ONR get involved, and what did Allen send them?
In 1957, 2 years after Jessup got his first letters, the ONR received its own mysterious package. It was marked oddly with Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. Inside was Jessup's book, The Case for the UFO, but this time it was heavily annotated. The pages were filled with cryptic notes, scribbled math, and bizarre physics equations in the margins.
So Allen decided to use Jessup's book as the physical platform for his truth.
Precisely. And when the ONR got this, they were, you can imagine, deeply perplexed. They couldn't track down the sender, Allen, but they quickly involved Jessup because his book was the central document. Jessup confirmed the handwriting matched the eccentric letters he'd received years earlier.
Okay, here's the crucial conspiracy hook. We have to address why the Navy, an organization dedicated to concrete research, would waste a single minute on what sounds like a delusional text.
This is the fuel that powered the conspiracy fire for decades. The fact that the ONR dedicated any resources to investigating this strange package suggested that something strange had to have happened. or at least that the annotations contained information the government was desperate to either suppress or verify.
So for conspiracy theorists, the Navy's investigation became the evidence.
It became evidence that Allen was telling the truth, and that the government was trying to figure out just how much he knew.
And the annotations themselves were almost theatrical. They were designed to heighten this sense of danger and secrecy.
Oh, they absolutely were. The notes were supposedly written in 3 different inks, suggesting 3 different commentators. They were referred to as Gemini, Mr. A, which was Allen, and Mr. B.
And what were these 3 voices discussing?
They were debating the experiment, discussing alien races, and voicing this concern that Jessup was getting dangerously close to discovering the truth about technology that was maybe extraterrestrial in origin.
So Allen didn't just write a hoax, he directed a small play in the margins of a book.
A multi-character, alien-themed thriller, right there in the margins. It's a phenomenal piece of psychological warfare designed to unnerve Jessup and impress the Navy.
But did he ever admit to this?
He did. Allen later confessed, and this is a critical detail, that he personally authored all the annotations himself, using different pens, specifically, in his words, to scare the hell out of Jessup.
Wow, that detail just perfectly encapsulates Carl Allen's personality. A theatrical mind, prone to elaborate pranks, using fear and complexity to draw attention to his claims.
And this complexity had real-world consequences within the Navy. The package was taken seriously enough by 2 specific ONR officers, Captain Sidney Sherby and Commander George W. Hoover, that they authorized the involvement of the Varro Manufacturing Corporation, a government contractor. Varro then produced 127 mimeographed copies of Jessup's book, complete with all of Allen's annotations.
Wait a minute, 127 copies of a highly eccentric annotated book suggesting alien involvement in a secret physics experiment, printed by a defense contractor and distributed internally within the Navy. That sounds like a gift to future conspiracy theorists.
It was a massive, if accidental, act of legitimization. These copies, which became known as the Varro edition, they became the ultimate piece of internal documentation for the conspiracy. They proved that senior military personnel treated the claims with enough seriousness to circulate the information.
Even if they didn't believe in the time travel, maybe they were worried about a security leak or some kind of real unauthorized experiment.
Exactly. But that internal document production convinced countless future researchers that the government was actively covering up a staggering secret.
Unfortunately, the story darkens significantly here with the tragic fate of Morris Jessup just 2 years later.
Jessup died suddenly in 1959. He was found deceased in his car. The official conclusion was suicide, caused by inhaling toxic fumes piped from the exhaust into the vehicle.
And the sources confirm he was in a bad place.
He was struggling immensely at the time. His books had failed commercially, his publisher dropped him, his wife had recently left him, and he had a documented history of alcohol struggles and had even expressed suicidal thoughts to friends. The personal turmoil was very real.
But in the context of this massive military secret he was investigating, the circumstances instantly became a source of suspicion.
Absolutely. The lack of an official autopsy, combined with the fact that no suicide note was ever found, immediately raised red flags for people who believed in the conspiracy. They argued that Jessup was murdered to silence him,
Assassinated by the same forces that carried out Project Rainbow.
because he was getting too close to verifying the truth hidden in Allen's highly annotated Varro edition. That was the theory.
The conspiracy narrative often requires that final piece of martyrdom to really elevate the whole story.
And Jessup's death provided it perfectly. There's one particularly potent anecdote that feeds this narrative. An account claims Jessup called a close friend the day before he died, excitedly claiming he'd made a devasa, a huge, world-changing breakthrough in his research, and planned to discuss it the very next day.
And that timeline discovery of a monumental truth, followed by a sudden, suspicious death, is textbook conspiracy fuel.
It is. So even with Jessup gone and official denials in place, the story refused to die. It entered the cultural bloodstream.
And it did that largely through repetition, right? It was repeated in books like Vincent Gaddis's 1965 Invisible Horizons.
Right, but the mass popularization truly exploded in 1979 with Charles Berlitz and William L. Moore's book, The Philadelphia Experiment, Project Invisibility. And that relied almost entirely on the Allen correspondence.
And then came the 1984 film, The Philadelphia Experiment, which introduced the concept to millions of casual viewers.
That film was pivotal. It's only loosely based on the original claims, but it centralized the time travel element, featuring 2 sailors who jumped 40 years into the future. It took the most fantastical aspect of the legend and gave it blockbuster visibility.
And this is where Alfred Bielek enters the picture, claiming to be an eyewitness decades after the fact. He perfectly demonstrates how these legends regenerate.
Bielek is a fascinating case study in how fame and media coverage can attract opportunists. He emerged after the 1984 film, claiming he was actually aboard the Eldridge during the experiment. He initially stated the movie was surprisingly accurate.
Hold on, he claimed his memories were suppressed for decades, and watching a B-movie suddenly triggered them. That sounds highly convenient.
Highly convenient and highly lucrative. Bielek became a staple on the UFO and conspiracy circuit, and he dramatically expanded his claims over time. He didn't just confirm the teleportation and time travel, he added completely unbelievable yet detail-rich assertions.
Tell us about those later claims. They are truly spectacular in their absurdity.
His later claims included that he traveled into the distant future, specifically to the years 2137 and 2749.
Wow.
He described a future Earth managed entirely by sophisticated computer systems, having been devastated by climate change and war, resulting in a global population of only 300 million people. He also firmly linked the Philadelphia experiment to a purported continuation, the Montauk Project,
The Montauk
which was supposedly a clandestine government time travel and mind control operation conducted beneath a former Air Force base on Long Island.
It's just remarkable how the legend evolved. It starts with one man's chaotic letters about a mid-century physics mishap, and by the 1980s, it's ballooned into mass memory erasure, future dystopias, and psychic mind control. The initial grain of truth is completely buried.
It perfectly illustrates how compelling narrative structure, once it's amplified by pop culture, becomes self-sustaining. Just attracts new believers and new witnesses decades after the supposed event took place.
Okay, we have to pivot now. We've laid out the thrilling narrative, the eccentric personalities. Now we have to get to the verifiable facts. This is where the story, despite its cultural persistence, completely falls apart. What is the official position of the U.S. Navy?
The U.S. government and the Navy consistently and firmly deny the entire story. They label the accounts as complete science fiction. In fact, recognizing how persistent the myth was, the Office of Naval Research even published an official information sheet in 1996 to formally debunk the claims.
So let's start with the foundation of any historical claim, the timeline and the documented logs. These facts are the heavy artillery in the debunking effort.
They are irrefutable. The primary ship involved, the USS Eldridge, was a destroyer escort. Crucially, it was not commissioned, meaning it was not active in the Navy fleet until August 27, 1943. This immediately casts doubt on any claim of major testing happening over the summer.
But the alleged disappearance happened in October 1943. Where do the Eldridge's official logs show its location during that critical time?
The logs are the most damaging evidence against the myth. They show the Eldridge was absolutely never in Philadelphia during October 1943.
Never.
It was undergoing shakedown training and convoy duties. Specifically, the logs place it firmly in the New York Harbor area and in nearby Long Island Sound until November 1st. It only entered Norfolk, Virginia on November 2nd.
So the key claim that it teleported instantly from Philadelphia to Norfolk in October is completely negated by documented convoy-level military records kept during wartime. How secure are those records?
During World War II, convoy and ship logs were meticulously kept. And naval ships were vital assets constantly under threat from German U-boats. Errors in logs of this nature, moving an entire ship hundreds of miles across two separate naval districts, would be catastrophic and virtually impossible to cover up entirely.
Right.
The fact that the logs of multiple other ships involved in those convoys corroborate the Eldridge's movement significantly validates the official position.
And what about Carl Allen's supposed vantage point, the SS Andrew Fierseth?
The SS Andrew Fierseth was also a real ship, but while its logs confirm it was traveling between Norfolk and various locations in October, its master, Lieutenant Junior Grade William S. Dodge, officially denied that he or his crew observed any unusual events whatsoever.
So Allen's entire claim rests on being an eyewitness on a specific ship, and the official record of that ship contradicts him completely.
Entirely.
So, if the Eldridge wasn't there and the witness didn't see it, what was the small, verifiable grain of truth that could have inspired the story?
The Navy was conducting secret experiments in the area, right?
They were. And this is the vital connection. The Navy was intensely focused on achieving invisibility, but only in the context of magnetic detection, not visual sight. The real experiments involved making ships undetectable to magnetic mines and torpedoes.
Ah, This distinction between visual invisibility and magnetic invisibility is everything. So explain the technology the Navy was actually focused on, degaussing. Degaussing is the process of reducing or eliminating a ship's magnetic signature. This is a critical strategic necessity against German U-boats which use these advanced magnetic triggers in their weapons.
Okay.
These magnetic mines would sit on the seafloor, and they were triggered to detonate when the massive, distorting magnetic field of a steel hull passed overhead. By making the ship magnetically invisible or neutral, it would pass over the mine harmlessly.
How technically involved was the degaussing process in 1943? It sounds pretty intensive.
It was highly intensive, visually dramatic, and potentially very confusing to an outside observer. The process involved wrapping the entire ship with these massive magnetic coils or thick, high-voltage power cables.
Okay.
These cables transmitted colossal electrical power, often requiring pulses of 2,000 amperes or more through the coils to generate a counterfield that neutralized the ship's natural magnetic field. This technology, pioneered by Canada's Charles F. Goodhave, was revolutionary and had to be kept absolutely secret.
So, if a merchant mariner like Allen saw a ship being rigged with huge coils and massive electrical cables, and he heard rumors about a secret project called Project Invisibility, the leap from magnetic stealth to visual teleportation isn't that far for a creative mind.
It's a very small cognitive leap, especially in a time of extreme wartime paranoia. The military jargon for stealth, camouflage, or radar suppression was likely misunderstood or deliberately exaggerated. An operation involving massive electrical discharges in extreme secrecy could easily be twisted into a tale of physics manipulation.
But what about those vivid descriptions? The strange, green, glowing fog. We can't explain that with a copper wire coil, can we?
Actually, we can with electrical phenomena. That is a very grounded explanation. St. Elmo's fire.
St. Elmo's fire.
Edward Dudgeon, a veteran who actually served on a nearby ship during these tests, confirmed the Navy was testing mechanisms that created extremely powerful electrical fields. St. Elmo's fire is a naturally occurring weather phenomenon on ships when powerful electric fields are generated. It results in a corona discharge. Dudgeon described the discharge he witnessed as a blue near green glow.
Perfectly matching Allen's strange green glowing fall.
Exactly. It's a powerful point of connection. Massive electrical pulses for degaussing, generating a bizarre, visible electrical glow. St. Elmo's fire, which an imaginative witness misinterprets as the start of a physics miracle.
And the claim of instantaneous transport between Philadelphia and Norfolk.
Researcher Jacques Vallée noted a very logical but strategic explanation for that. To avoid detection by German U-boats operating along the vulnerable Atlantic coast, military ships often used the clandestine inland route, the Chesapeake and Delaware Canal and the Chesapeake Bay. This route allowed military ships to move quickly and secretly between Philadelphia and Norfolk. In a single day, a feat merchant ships couldn't achieve due to routing restrictions and the U-boat threat.
So the teleportation was actually just the use of a strategically secret inland waterway. That makes perfect sense for wartime logistics.
It does. The Navy would have needed to keep the use of that route quiet to maintain their strategic advantage, meaning a ship could appear to vanish from one port and reappear quickly in the other without explanation to the public, fueling the rumor that it teleported.
Finally, we have to address the disappearing sailor, the one who was supposedly fused into the ship's metal.
Vallée again cited a much more mundane yet amusing anecdote. He spoke to a veteran who claimed to be the actual man Allen witnessed disappearing at a bar.
Oh, this should be good.
A brawl broke out, and because this sailor was underage for drinking, friendly barmaids quickly whisked him out a back door before the military police arrived. When the police questioned the barmaids about the missing sailor, they simply claimed, maybe a bit dramatically, that he had vanished.
Protecting themselves and the sailor from getting in trouble.
Exactly.
So the great physics violation, the man fused into metal, was actually an underage drinker making a swift escape from a tavern brawl. It undermines the credibility of the primary witness dramatically.
It provides a specific, simple explanation for one of Allen's most potent eyewitnesses' claims, showing that Allen was taking normal, localized events and weaving them into this grand, false narrative.
Okay, we've established the factual impossibilities, the logistical alternatives, and the technological reality. The entire story hinges on the single erratic testimony of Carl Allen. So let's delve a little deeper into who this individual truly was.
Carl Allen, whose full name was Carl Meredith Allen, was indeed a real person. He lived at the New Kensington address he provided. He was a former merchant mariner, which gave surface credibility to his claim of witnessing the event from the SS Andrew Furuseth.
But his military record wasn't great.
It was brief and inglorious. He was dismissed from the Marines in less than a year.
When researchers tracked him down, what was the definitive description of his character?
Robert A. Gorman, among others, managed to connect with Allen's relatives and acquaintances, and their description of him is central to understanding the hoax. They described him as a drifter, but possessing a fantastic mind capable of immense creativity. And crucially, they characterized him as a master leg puller,
A master leg puller.
a known flamboyant prankster. They noted that his extensive reading on subjects like cosmology and physics sometimes got all twisted somehow in his mind.
That phrase, master leg puller, summarizes the entire Philadelphia experiment legend, doesn't it? He had the intellectual capacity to grasp complex concepts like UFT, the creativity to inject horror elements like fused crewmen, and the psychological drive of a prankster who just loved the attention his chaotic revelations generated.
It completely reframes the narrative. We are not dealing with a suppressed truth told by a terrified witness. We are dealing with a highly creative, attention-seeking individual who found validation in the uproar his fabricated claims generated.
And his bizarre habit of repeated retraction that just reinforces the idea that this was an elaborate game for him.
Absolutely. Allen would fully commit to the story when speaking to authors like Berlitz and Moore, giving it immense conviction. Yet at other times, he would completely retract it, declaring it an elaborate hoax.
Like when?
For instance, he openly admitted to the Aerial Phenomena Research Office in 1969 that he had made the entire thing up, including all those detailed annotations in Jessup's book, only to then retract that retraction later when the story gained more fame and cultural value. He wasn't committed to the truth. He was committed to the chaos and the spotlight.
Let's underline the scientific impossibility one last time. Even if Allen was entirely honest, the alleged event simply could not have happened without immediate widespread disaster.
The scale of energy required to warp space-time and render a 93-meter-long steel vessel visually invisible it's immense. It would necessitate controlled fusion energy, an effect equivalent to several atomic bombs going off simultaneously and locally. If such an event happened in the densely populated Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, the physical shockwave and energy release would have caused catastrophic, undeniable destruction visible for hundreds of miles.
And beyond the physics, the logistical impossibility is staggering.
It requires an unprecedented level of global conspiracy. Not only would the U.S. government have had to successfully solve the theory of everything in 1943, but they would have had to erase the memories of every single person in the harbor, hundreds, possibly thousands, who would have witnessed the blinding flash, the massive sound, and the sudden materialization and dematerialization of a large vessel.
And falsify all the logs.
And they would have had to falsify every single piece of logistical documentation for the Eldridge and the Furuseth.
The ultimate point, though, is the value of the alleged secret itself.
Yes. If the U.S. had solved the unified field theory in 1943, they would not have used it solely to teleport one small destroyer, suffer catastrophic crew losses, and then quietly bury the project. That knowledge, the control over gravity and matter, would have instantly rendered every other nation's military technology obsolete. The country possessing the UFT would essentially hold the undisputed keys to the universe.
They would have perpetual, insurmountable technological supremacy.
And the idea that they would test it once, catastrophically, and then shut down the most valuable discovery in human history it's fundamentally illogical.
So, if the source is unreliable, the timeline is false, the science is impossible, and the real events have logical, mundane explanations, why do we still talk about the Philadelphia experiment nearly a century later?
It taps into several deep, persistent sociocultural needs. Firstly, it offers a compelling narrative structure, one that blends high-tech ambition with human failure. It possesses what we might call the illusion of depth. It contains enough specific scientific jargon like UFT and Project Rainbow and verifiable names like Jessup and the Eldridge to make critical analysis difficult for the average person.
It's the perfect modern mythology.
Exactly. And it capitalizes brilliantly on the high paranoia surrounding government secrecy that really intensified during the Cold War. People want to believe the government is hiding secrets so monumental that they defy physics. It offers a counter-narrative to official reality, feeding into the same psychological landscape that sustains beliefs in Area 51 or deep state cover-ups.
In a world of increasing information overload, people often prefer the dramatic, thought-provoking story over the mundane, factual reality.
Absolutely. The emotional impact of a story featuring crewmen fused into metal and accidental jumps through time will always outweigh the drier, complicated reality of degaussing coils and naval logistics. The story persists because it is exciting, it challenges authority, and it validates our fundamental human curiosity about the possibility of the unknown.
We started this deep dive with the tale of radical wartime technology, asking if the U.S. Navy achieved invisibility, teleportation, and time travel. What we found was that the undeniable kernel of truth was a highly successful, critically important piece of naval engineering, degaussing technology, designed to protect ships from German magnetic mines.
The real naval experiments were genuine wartime necessities, kept quiet for the only valid military reason, maintaining a strategic advantage against a lethal enemy, not hiding a reality-bending physics breakthrough. The secrets the Navy kept were strategic, not metaphysical.
And so, here is our final provocative thought for you to consider. Despite decades of irrefutable evidence proving the hoax, the Philadelphia experiment myth continues to resurface and regenerate, attracting new witnesses and new fantastical elements. Does the continued persistence of this legend serve as a form of collective wish fulfillment where we fundamentally want the government to possess secrets so amazing that they defy the known laws of physics, perhaps because believing in a spectacular, suppressed technological breakthrough is ultimately more comforting and less terrifying than confronting the often gruesome, mundane, and very real truths of wartime necessity and military secrecy? Something to chew on as you consider the line between historical fact and modern mythology.